Is was a young, hardworking man from the bustling city. Though his days were filled with noise and the rush of life, he always cherished his visits to his home village, a peaceful place surrounded by green hills and whispering streams. One such visit changed his life forever. It was the annual Yam Festival, and the entire village was alive with music, laughter, and dance. That's when he saw her, Ada, a breathtaking beauty who moved with such grace it seemed the earth itself made way for her. Her skin glowed like the morning sun, her smile was pure magic, and her voice was as soothing as the village stream. Is was captivated. He wasted no time approaching her, his heart racing like a village drummer's beat. They talked under the moonlight, and it felt as though they had known each other forever. Is knew one thing for certain: he wanted Ada to be his wife. The village buzzed with excitement when Is declared his intentions. Ada, however, had a strange condition. She told him she had no family and no past she could speak of. This puzzled him, but his love for her was greater than his curiosity. They married in a grand ceremony, and Ada moved to the city with Is. Life was blissful, and Is counted himself lucky to have found such a perfect wife. But Ada had rules, strange ones. She forbade him from ever opening her special wooden box, which she kept hidden in their room. "What's inside is my secret," she said. Is, blinded by love, promised never to look. Months turned into years, and Isa's life seemed like a dream. But one night, curiosity got the better of him. Ada had fallen into a deep sleep after a long day, and the mysterious box seemed to call out to him. His hands trembled as he opened it, revealing something that turned his blood cold. Coiled inside was the glistening skin of a snake, shed and perfectly preserved. He staggered back, his heart pounding. The room suddenly felt colder, darker. Then he heard a whisper, a slithering sound. He turned and saw Ada standing behind him, her eyes glowing like burning coals. "I warned you, Is," she said in a voice that was no longer sweet but chilling. "Now, you must know who I truly am." Isa's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at Ada. She seemed to grow taller, her presence darker, her once soft features now shadowed with an unearthly glow. Her voice slithered through the air like a whisper from the underworld. "You promised, Is," she repeated, her tone steady but filled with a quiet, terrifying power. "Now you see the truth I tried to shield you from." Is stumbled backward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ada, what are you?" Ada tilted her head, her glowing eyes locking with his. "I am what the elders warned of, what the villagers feared to name. But I loved you, Is. I chose to live as one of you because I hoped, you would never need to know." Is felt the weight of the wooden box in his hands. It seemed heavier now, as if the truth inside carried a curse of its own. You're a snake." Ada let out a soft, humorless laugh, her once melodic voice now carrying a strange hiss. "Not just a snake, my love. I am Nwani Oho Akuko, a being of both worlds. Half human, half spirit. And now, because of your curiosity, my secret binds us both in ways you cannot yet comprehend." Isa's hands trembled. "What do you mean?" Ada stepped closer, her movements fluid, almost serpentine. "By opening that box, you have invited my world into yours. You are now a part of this secret, and there is no turning back." The room grew colder, the flickering light from their single lantern casting shadows that seemed to twist and write. A sudden, loud hiss broke the silence, and Is turned to see a large, colorful snake slithering toward Ada. It coiled itself at her feet, its scales shimmering with impossible hues. Isa's knees buckled, but he forced himself to stand. He loved Ada, didn't he? But this was beyond anything he could have imagined. "Tell me what to do," he begged, tears in his eyes. "Tell me how to fix this." Ada's gaze softened, the glow in her eyes dimming slightly. "It cannot be undone, but I can protect you, if you trust me." He swallowed hard, his heart torn between love and fear. "I trust you," he whispered. Ada smiled, but it was a bittersweet expression. "Then hold on, my love. For the world you know is about to change forever." Suddenly, the room dissolved into darkness, and he felt a strange pull, as though he were being dragged into another realm. The last thing he saw was Ada's face, her expression filled with both sorrow and determination. He woke up in an unfamiliar place. The air was thick and humid, filled with the sound of rustling leaves and the distant cries of strange animals. He looked around and realized he was in a dense, mystical forest. The trees towered above him, their trunks twisting unnaturally, and their leaves shimmered like they were made of precious gems. The ground beneath him glowed faintly, as if it held a life of its own. Ada. He called out, his voice echoing eerily through the forest. Panic gripped him as he remembered the events from the night before. Where was he? And where was Ada? "I'm here," came Ada's voice, calm and steady. She emerged from the shadows, her pink Ankara dress glowing softly in the dim light of the forest. Her movements were graceful, almost otherworldly. The snake from before slithered beside her, its scales gleaming like a living rainbow. What is this place?" he stammered, trying to make sense of his surroundings. "This is my world," Ada said, her voice tinged with sadness. "The realm of the spirits. You entered it the moment you opened that box. This is where my true nature resides." He felt his knees weaken, but he forced himself to remain standing. "Why am I here? What's going to happen to us?" Ada stepped closer, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You are here because the bond between us is now unbreakable. But this place is dangerous for you, Is. You are still human, and this world does not welcome outsiders." The forest seemed to respond to her words, the shadows growing darker and the air colder. A low growl echoed in the distance, sending shivers down Isa's spine. "I will protect you," Ada continued, her expression resolute. "But you must trust me completely. This world is full of spirits who will see you as an intruder. If they catch you, they will not spare you." Isa's mind raced. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Why keep it a secret?" Ada's gaze dropped, guilt washing over her face. "Because I wanted to live a normal life, even if it was just for a little while. I didn't want to burden you with my truth." Before Is could respond, the growling grew louder. The shadows began to take shape, forming into strange, menacing figures with glowing red eyes. They moved toward them, their movement slow but deliberate. "We have to go," Ada said urgently, grabbing Isa's hand. The touch of her hand was warm and reassuring, but Is couldn't shake the fear gripping his heart. As they ran through the forest, the glowing figures pursued them, their growls echoing like thunder. The path ahead twisted and turned, making it hard to see where they were going. Isa's breath came in ragged gasps, but Ada moved with ease, as if the forest bent to her will. Finally, they reached a clearing. In the center stood a massive tree with golden bark and shimmering leaves. Ada stopped abruptly and turned to Is. "This is the tree of passage," she said, her voice urgent. "If we can reach its heart, we might find a way to return to your world. But it won't be easy. The spirits will try to stop us." Is nodded, his fear replaced by determination. "Then let's do it. Together." Ada smiled faintly, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "Hold on to me, and whatever happens, don't let go." As they stepped closer to the tree, the ground began to tremble, and the shadows around them grew darker. The spirits let out a deafening roar, closing in on them. He tightened his grip on Ada's hand, ready to face whatever came next. The air around Is and Ada grew colder as the shadowy spirits closed in, their glowing red eyes piercing through the dim light of the forest. The tree of passage loomed ahead, its golden bark shimmering like a beacon of hope. But the path to it was far from clear. "We don't have much time," Ada yelled, pulling Is forward. Her grip was firm, her determination unshaken, but Is could feel her tension. The ground beneath them shifted and trembled as if the forest itself was alive and resisting their passage. Thick vines shot out from the earth, riding like snakes, trying to trip them. He stumbled, nearly falling, but Ada caught him. "Focus, Is," she urged. "The spirits are testing your resolve. If you show fear, they will consume you." Is gulped, his heart racing. He could feel the heat of the spirit's eyes on his back and hear their guttural growls growing louder. "I'm trying," he gasped, regaining his footing. As they neared the tree, a massive spirit, larger than the rest, materialized before them. Its form was vague, like a black cloud with shifting shapes, but its presence was suffocating. It let out a deafening roar that shook the ground. Ada stopped abruptly, her eyes narrowing. "This is the guardian of passage," she said. "It won't let us through unless we prove we are worthy." He stared at the monstrous figure, his legs trembling. "How do we do that?" Ada stepped forward, her voice steady. "By showing it that our bond is unbreakable." She turned to Iz, her gaze piercing. "You must trust me now more than ever." Before Iz could respond, the guardian lunged, its massive form rushing toward them like a storm. Ada raised her free hand, and a burst of light erupted from her palm, pushing the spirit back momentarily. But it wasn't enough to stop it. "You must hold on to me, no matter what happens," Ada said urgently. "The guardian will try to separate us, but if you let go, we'll both be lost." Iz nodded, gripping her hand tightly. "I won't let go." The guardian roared again, its form splitting into dozens of shadowy figures that swirled around them. The air became thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. Iz felt a strange force tugging at him, trying to pull him away from Ada. "Iz, don't look at them," Ada shouted. "Focus on me." Iz clenched his jaw, his eyes fixed on Ada. The shadows whispered to him, their voices seductive and chilling. "She lied to you," they hissed. "She's not what she seems. Let her go, and you'll be free." But he shook his head, blocking out their voices. "I don't care what you are, Ada," he said, his voice firm. "I chose you, and I keep choosing you." Ada's eyes glistened with tears, but she smiled. "Then we'll make it through this." The golden tree began to glow brighter, its light cutting through the shadows. The spirits screamed in agony, their forms dissolving in the radiance. The guardian roared one last time before retreating, its massive form vanishing into the darkness. Iz and Ada stumbled into the tree's embrace, the golden light surrounding them. The world around them dissolved, and Iz felt a strange sensation, like he was being lifted and pulled in every direction at once. When the light faded, they were back in their room. The wooden box lay closed on the floor, and the air was still. Iz looked around, his heart pounding. Did we make it?" he asked, turning to Ada. Ada nodded, but her expression was somber. "For now. But the bond we forged has tied our fates together forever. The spirits will not forget, and neither should you." He sat down, his mind reeling. He looked at Ada, who now seemed more human and vulnerable than ever. "So what happens now?" Ada knelt beside him, taking his hand. "Now, we face whatever comes together. As one." He sat in the quiet of their home, the weight of the experience heavy on his shoulders. The wooden box that had caused all the chaos lay closed on the floor, its presence still haunting. Ada stood near the window, her gaze distant, as if she was listening to a voice he couldn't hear. "We can't live like this forever," he finally said, breaking the silence. "You said the spirits won't forget. What does that mean?" Ada turned to him, her face a mixture of fear and determination. "It means that they will return. The spirits don't easily forgive those who challenge their authority, especially someone like you, a human who entered their realm." He frowned, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Why did you marry me knowing your word would put us in danger?" Ada walked over and knelt before him, her hands resting on his. "Because I love you, Is. I thought I could keep my two words separate, that my love for you would shield us. But the truth is, I underestimated their reach." He stared into her glowing eyes, his anger softening. He loved her too, but this was a love born out of mystery and now entangled with danger. "What do we do now?" he asked. Ada's grip on his hands tightened. "We prepare. The spirits won't strike immediately. They will watch, waiting for a moment of weakness. But there's something we can do to strengthen our bond and protect you. What is it? Is asked, his voice steadied despite the unease creeping into his chest. Ada hesitated for a moment, then said, "You must undergo the rite of unity. It's an ancient ritual that will bind our spirits together, making it harder for the spirits to harm you. But it's not without risk." Is leaned closer, his resolve firm. "What kind of risk?" Ada looked down, her voice trembling. "If the ritual fails, you could be trapped in my world forever, unable to return." Isa's breath hitched, but he didn't falter. "If it means keeping us safe, I'll do it." Ada's eyes softened, and for the first time, a genuine smile crossed her face. "Thank you, Is. Your courage means more to me than you'll ever know." The next day, they traveled to an isolated part of the village where the elders spoke of a sacred grove hidden deep in the forest. The journey was long, the path overgrown and silent, but Ada moved with confidence, as if the forest itself guided her. When they reached the grove, it was unlike anything Is had ever seen. The clearing was bathed in an otherworldly light, and at its center stood a circle of ancient stones, their surfaces carved with glowing symbols. Ada turned to Is. "This is where the rite will take place. Are you ready?" Is nodded, his heart pounding. "What do I need to do?" Ada stepped into the circle, her movements deliberate and graceful. She extended a hand toward him. "Step into the circle with me and trust in our bond." Is took her hand and stepped into the circle. The moment his foot touched the ground, the air around them changed. The forest grew still, and a faint hum filled the air, like the world itself was holding its breath. Ada began to chant in a language Is couldn't understand, her voice carrying a power that made the air vibrate. The glowing symbols on the stones grew brighter, casting the grove in a golden light. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and a blinding light erupted from the center of the circle. Is felt a pull, like an invisible force was reaching into his soul. He clenched Ada's hand tightly, refusing to let go. "Ada," he called out, his voice strained. "Stay with me, Is." Ada shouted, her voice filled with both power and desperation. "Don't let go." The light grew brighter, and the hum turned into a deafening roar. Is felt as if he was being torn apart and put back together at the same time. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the light vanished, and the grove fell silent. Is opened his eyes, his body trembling. Ada stood before him, her face streaked with tears. "It's done," she whispered. "The bond is complete." Is felt different, as if a piece of him now carried Ada's essence. But before he could say anything, the faint sound of whispering filled the air. Ada's face darkened. "They know," she said. "And they are coming." Is felt the chill in the air as Ada's words sank in. The spirits were coming, and there was no more time to question or hesitate. The rite of unity had bound their fates, but it had also drawn the spirits' wrath. "What do we do now?" Is asked, his voice steadied despite the tremor in his chest. Ada gripped his hand tightly. "We stand our ground. They'll test our bond, but if we hold firm, they cannot break it." The whispering around them grew louder, turning into low, guttural murmurs. Shadows began to creep into the grove, slithering across the glowing stones. The symbols dimmed as the spirit's presence grew stronger. He clenched his fist, trying to steady his breathing. He turned to Ada. "Tell me what to do." Ada stepped forward, her pink Ankara dress glowing faintly in the dimming light. "Trust in me, Is. No matter what they show you, no matter what they say, you must remember that our bond is stronger than their illusions." The shadows coalesced into forms, tall, menacing figures with eyes that burned like embers. They surrounded the circle, their voices echoing in the air like 1,000 whispers. One of the spirits stepped forward, its form shifting and flickering like a flame. "You dare bind yourself to her," it hissed, its voice dripping with contempt. "Do you not see what she truly is?" Is held his ground, his voice firm. "I see her for who she is, and I choose her." The spirit laughed, a sound that made the air around them tremble. Then let us see how strong your bond truly is. The shadows surged forward, breaking into smaller, faster forms that darted around the circle. The ground shook, and the light from the stones flickered dangerously. Is felt a sudden pull, as if an invisible hand was trying to rip him away from Ada. Ada shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Focus on me. Is gritted his teeth, his eyes locking onto Ada's. The world around him seemed to blur, the spirit's whispers growing louder, trying to drown out her voice. They're trying to break us, Ada said, her voice steady despite the storm raging around them. But they can't if we hold on. The shadows grew more aggressive, their forms twisting into monstrous shapes. One lunged at Is, its fiery eyes burning into his soul. He stumbled back but felt Ada's hand pull him upright. No fear, Is, she said, her eyes glowing with determination. Our bond is stronger than they know. Is took a deep breath, his fear giving way to a surge of determination. He tightened his grip on Ada's hand and stepped forward, facing the spirits. You can't have us, he said, his voice ringing with newfound strength. Our love is stronger than your hatred. The spirits recoiled, their forms flickering as if his words had struck a nerve. Ada joined him, her presence radiant and unyielding. Together, they stood firm as the shadows screamed and dissolved into the air. The grove fell silent once more, the light from the stones returning. Ada turned to Is, her eyes filled with both relief and pride. You did it, Is. We did it. Is smiled, his heart racing. I told you, Ada. I'll always choose you. But as they stepped out of the circle, a faint, lingering whisper followed them, a reminder that their battle with the spirits was far from over. The grove's silence was unnerving, but Is and Ada stood strong, their breaths heavy from the encounter. The golden glow of the stones began to fade, returning the grove to its natural state. Yet, the whisper that followed them lingered, faint but persistent, like a shadow refusing to leave. We may have driven them back for now, Ada said, her voice steady but her eyes wary, scanning the dark forest around them. But this is far from over. They'll regroup, and next time, they'll be stronger. Is clenched his fists, his mind racing. Then we need to prepare. There must be something more we can do. Ada turned to him, her expression softening. You've already proven your strength, Is. The spirits don't retreat easily. They know now that you're not just any mortal. But they'll test us again, especially me. They'll try to exploit the part of me that's tied to their world. He stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone in this. Whatever comes, we face it together. Ada smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Thank you, Is. Your belief in me is my greatest strength. As they left the grove, the forest seemed to watch them. The trees swayed with no wind, and the air carried an eerie stillness. Ada guided Is back toward the village, her steps quick and purposeful. Back at their home, Ada began preparing for the next phase. She placed protective items around the house, each one intricately carved and glowing faintly when placed. Is helped, following her instructions without hesitation. What are these? He asked as he hung an item above the doorway. They are barriers, Ada explained. They won't stop the spirits completely, but they'll slow them down. It will give us time to act if they attack again. Is nodded, his resolve growing. What else can we do? Ada hesitated, then said, there's an elder in the neighboring village. She knows the ways of the spirits and might help us strengthen the bond we created. But going to her will be dangerous. The spirits will sense our movement and try to stop us. Then we'll go at dawn, Is said firmly. The sooner we find her, the better. That night, Is sat by the window, watching the moonlight spill into the room. Ada slept nearby, her face calm but her breathing uneven. He knew the journey ahead would test them both in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Just as he began to doze off, a faint rustling outside the house caught his attention. He froze, his ears straining. The sound grew louder, like leaves being dragged across the ground. Is grabbed the lantern and stepped toward the door, his heart pounding. Ada, he called softly. She stirred, her eyes snapping open. Something's outside. Ada sat up instantly, her senses alert. Don't open the door, she warned. It could be them. He nodded, but the rustling turned into a faint knock, a slow, deliberate tap against the wooden door. His blood ran cold. Who's there? He called out, his voice steadied despite his fear. The knock stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, a deep, guttural voice replied, "You cannot run forever." Isa's grip on the lantern tightened. He turned to Ada, whose face had gone pale. "They've come sooner than I thought," she whispered. "We need to be ready." The knocking resumed, louder this time, as if the spirits were testing the strength of the barrier. The protective charms glowed faintly, holding back whatever force was trying to break through. He stepped beside Ada, his determination unwavering. "Whatever happens, I'm not leaving your side." Ada looked at him, her eyes filled with both fear and admiration. "Then let's face them together." The knocking turned into pounding, and the air inside the house grew heavy. The spirits were here, and this time, they wouldn't back down. The pounding on the door grew louder, each thud echoing through the small house like a drumbeat of impending doom. The protective charms flickered, their glow dimming with each strike. He felt his chest tighten, but he held his ground beside Ada, refusing to show fear. Ada reached out and touched one of the items near the doorframe. Her fingers glowed faintly as she whispered an incantation in a language he couldn't understand. The item's light grew stronger, but it flickered again, as if struggling against an overwhelming force. "They are testing." "The barrier," Ada said, her voice calm but urgent. "If they break it, they'll come through." He glanced at the door, then back at Ada. "What can we do to stop them?" Ada looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly. "We need to strengthen the bond between us. The spirits are feeding on any doubt or fear they sense. If we show them our unity, they'll weaken." He nodded, his determination unshaken. "Tell me what to do." Ada stepped closer, her hands gripping his tightly. "Close your eyes and focus on me. Remember why you chose me, why you trust me. Push everything else out of your mind." He closed his eyes, his breathing steady. He thought of the first time he saw Ada at the village festival, her smile brighter than the stars. He remembered their laughter, their shared dreams, and the strength they gave each other. His love for her burned brighter than his fear. The air around them changed. The pounding on the door slowed, the heavy thuds growing weaker. He opened his eyes and saw the charms glowing brighter, their light pushing back against the shadows outside. "It's working," Ada said, her voice filled with hope. "They can feel our bond." But the reprieve was short-lived. A deafening roar erupted from outside, shaking the walls of the house. The shadows pressed harder against the barrier, their fiery eyes blazing with anger. The door creaked under the pressure, the wood splintering at the edges. "They are bringing their strongest," Ada whispered, her face pale. I need you to trust me completely." "I do," he said without hesitation. "What do you need me to do?" Ada's eyes glowed brighter, her expression resolute. "I'm going to channel my spirit energy into the barrier. It's dangerous, and if I falter, they'll break through. I need you to guard me while I do this." He swallowed hard but nodded. "I'll protect you. Do what you have to." Ada knelt near the door, her hands glowing as she pressed them against the frame. She began chanting again, her voice strong and steady. The items around the house flared to life, their light forming a protective dome around the home. The spirits howled in rage, their forms battering against the barrier. One shadowy figure, larger and more menacing than the others, began clawing at the light, its fiery eyes locked on Ada. He grabbed the nearby staff and stepped in front of her, his heart pounding but his grip steady. "Stay away from her," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. The large spirit lunged, its claw-like appendages slamming against the barrier. He swung the staff, the blow connecting with a burst of light. The spirit recoiled, hissing in pain, but it didn't retreat. Ada's chanting grew louder, the light around her intensifying. The barrier paused, pushing the shadows back further. But Is could see the strain on her face, sweat beading on her forehead as she poured all her energy into the protection. Almost there, Is, she said through gritted teeth. Just a little longer. Is tightened his grip on the staff, his resolve unshaken. As the shadows lunged again, he met them with everything he had, standing as a shield for the woman he loved. The spirit screamed one last time as the light from the charms exploded outward, consuming the shadows in a brilliant flash. The house fell silent, the air still and calm once more. Is dropped the staff, his body trembling. He turned to Ada, who collapsed to the floor, her breathing shallow. He rushed to her side, cradling her in his arms. Ada, he said softly, his voice filled with concern. Are you okay? Ada opened her eyes, her glowing gaze dim but steady. We did it, she whispered. They're gone, for now. Is held her close, his heart heavy but relieved. The spirits had been defeated, but he knew this was only the beginning. Their bond had been tested, and while they had won this battle, the war was far from over. We'll face whatever comes next, he said, his voice firm. Together. Ada smiled faintly, her strength slowly returning. Together. Is carried Ada back inside the house, her body weak but her spirit unbroken. The battle had left them both drained, but he knew there was no time to rest. The faint whispers outside had quieted, but he could feel the lingering presence of the spirits. They were still watching, waiting for an opportunity. Ada stirred in his arms, her voice soft. Is the elder. We need to go to her before they recover? You're not strong enough yet, Is replied, his voice firm. We leave at first light. You need to regain your strength. Ada nodded weakly, her trust in Is unwavering. He placed her gently on their mat and covered her with a blanket. Sitting by her side, he held her hand, his mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. Morning came swiftly, the sun casting long shadows across the village. Ada had regained some of her strength, though her steps were slower than usual. Is walked beside her, his protective nature evident in every movement. They left the house, heading toward the neighboring village where the elder lived. The journey was tense. The forest seemed alive, its every sound amplified by their heightened senses. Birds sang faintly, and the wind whispered through the trees, but Is couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they neared the elder's home, a small hut surrounded by sacred carvings and symbols, Ada stopped abruptly. She looked at Is, her face pale. Do you feel that? Is nodded, his eyes scanning the dense forest. The air felt heavier, colder. They're here, aren't they? Before Ada could answer, the shadows began to shift, and the whispers returned, louder and more menacing than before. Figures emerged from the darkness, their forms indistinct but their fiery eyes unmistakable. Is gripped the staff he had brought with him, stepping in front of Ada. Stay behind me, he said, his voice steadied despite the fear in his chest. The largest of the spirits stepped forward, its form more defined than the others. It radiated power, its presence suffocating. You dare seek the elder's help, it hissed, its voice like the wind through dead leaves. You cannot escape us. Is tightened his grip on the staff. We're not running. If you want us, you'll have to go through me. The spirit laughed, a deep, chilling sound that made the air around them vibrate. You think your love is enough to protect you? This is our world, mortal. You do not belong here. Ada stepped forward, her voice strong despite her weakness. He belongs with me, and I belong to both worlds. You cannot break what we've built. The spirit roared, and the others surged forward, their shadowy forms swirling like a storm. He swung his staff, the glow of Ada's protective charms igniting as he struck. The spirits recoiled, but they didn't retreat. We can't fight them here, Ada said, her voice urgent. We need to get to the elder. She can help us. Is nodded, grabbing her hand. Together, they ran toward the hut, the spirits close behind. The carvings around the elder's home began to glow as they approached, forming a barrier that slowed the spirits' advance. The elder, An older woman with piercing eyes and an aura of calm power stood at the doorway. She raised her hand, and the barrier strengthened, forcing the spirits to retreat. "You've brought the storm to my doorstep," the elder said, her voice stern but not unkind. "Come inside. We have much to discuss." Is and Ada stepped into the hut, the door closing behind them. The elder motioned for them to sit, her gaze piercing. "You've bonded with a spirit, young man. That is no small thing. The spirits will not stop until they have what they seek. How do we stop them?" Is asked, his voice firm. "How do we protect ourselves?" The elder studied them for a moment, then said, "There is a ritual, a final binding that will make your bond unbreakable. But it comes at a cost." "What cost?" Ada asked, her voice steady. The elder's gaze softened. "One of you must give up part of your essence. It will weaken you, but it will strengthen the bond and repel the spirits permanently." Is and Ada exchanged a glance, their love and determination evident. "We'll do whatever it takes," he said. The elder nodded. "Then prepare yourselves. The ritual begins tonight." Inside the elder's hut, the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs and the weight of unspoken truths. Is and Ada sat across from the elder, their hands intertwined, their determination unshaken despite the ominous words that had just been spoken. "One of us must give up part of our essence," Is repeated, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. "What does that mean?" The elder leaned forward, her sharp gaze piercing. "It means you will lose a part of what makes you whole." For Ada, it could mean weakening her connection to the spirit world. For you, it could mean giving up a piece of your humanity. The choice is not to be made lightly. Ada's grip on Isa's hand tightened. "Is there no other way?" The elder shook her head. "If you wish to repel the spirits permanently and protect your bond, this is the only way. But I warn you, the spirits will fight back during the ritual. They will try to stop you, for they cannot bear to lose the power they hold over you both." Is looked at Ada, his love for her shining through his fear. "I do it," he said firmly. "I give up part of my humanity if it means keeping you safe." "No," Ada said immediately, her voice trembling. "I've already dragged you into my world. This is my burden to bear." The elder raised her hand, silencing them. "The decision must be made together, for the bond you share is your greatest weapon. The ritual will begin at sunset. Until then, prepare yourselves." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the forest, Is and Ada stood in a clearing behind the elder's hut. A large, intricate circle had been drawn into the earth, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The elder stood at its center, chanting softly as the air around them grew colder. "The spirits will come," the elder warned. "They will do everything they can to stop this ritual. You must not waver, no matter what you see or hear." Is and Ada stepped into the circle, their hands clasped tightly. The elder began chanting louder, her voice echoing through the clearing. The glow of the circle intensified, and the air seemed to vibrate with energy. At first, nothing happened. Then, the forest grew unnaturally quiet. A low, guttural growl broke the silence, and shadowy forms began to emerge from the trees, their fiery eyes locked onto the circle. "They are here," Ada whispered, her voice trembling. The largest of the spirits stepped forward, its form towering and menacing. "You think you can sever our hold on you?" it hissed. "You belong to us." He stepped forward, shielding Ada with his body. "She doesn't belong to you. We don't belong to you." The spirit laughed, a chilling sound that made the ground tremble. "We shall see." The shadows surged forward, slamming against the barrier created by the glowing circle. The light flickered but held, forcing the spirits back. The elder's chanting grew louder, her voice filled with urgency. "Focus on each other," she shouted. "Your bond is the key." He turned to Ada, his eyes filled with love and determination. "We can do this. Together." Ada nodded, her fear giving way to resolve. "Together." The spirit screamed in fury, their forms twisting as they attacked the barrier again and again. The glow of the circle began to waver, and Is felt the air grow heavier, as if the spirits were trying to suffocate them. Is, Ada, the elder called out. The choice must be made now. Is and Ada looked at each other, their hearts speaking louder than words. Without hesitation, they spoke in unison. We share the burden. The elder's eyes widened, but she nodded, her chanting shifting into a different rhythm. The circle's light flared, enveloping Is and Ada in a blinding glow. The spirits screamed, their forms dissolving into the air as the power of the bond pushed them back. Is felt a strange warmth flood his body, as if a part of him was being taken away. He looked at Ada and saw her glowing with the same light, her essence blending with his. The pain was sharp but brief, replaced by a profound sense of unity. When the light faded, the clearing was silent. The spirits were gone, and the circle's glow had dimmed. Is and Ada stood together, their bond stronger than ever, their spirits intertwined. The elder approached them, her expression unreadable. You have done what few would dare. The spirits will no longer haunt you, but the bond you share is now eternal. Cherish it, for it is both your greatest strength and your greatest responsibility. Is looked at Ada, his heart full. I wouldn't have it any other way. Ada smiled, her eyes shimmering with tears. Neither would I. As they left the clearing hand in hand, the forest seemed to hum with approval, its shadows retreating. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time, they faced the future with hope and the unshakable power of their love. As Is and Ada stood in the clearing, their bond now sealed by the ritual, a gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying an unexpected sound, a faint, melodic hum that neither of them recognized. The elder, who had been watching silently, suddenly stiffened. Her eyes darted toward the shadows that surrounded them, her expression turning grave. That sound, she whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. It's not over. Is frowned, gripping Ada's hand tightly. What do you mean? We defeated them, didn't we? The elder stepped back, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Not all spirits are the same. You've drawn the attention of something far more ancient, and far more powerful. Before Is could respond, the ground beneath their feet trembled, and the glowing symbols of the ritual circle flickered, as if something was draining their energy. From the edge of the forest, a single figure began to emerge, a towering shadow with eyes that burned brighter than the sun and a voice that echoed like thunder. You dare defy the order of realms, the figure boomed, its presence suffocating. Your bond may have saved you from the weak, but it has awakened me. Isa's heart pounded as he positioned himself in front of Ada. What are you? The figure chuckled, its laughter shaking the trees. I am what your kind fears most. And now, your love will be tested in ways you cannot imagine. The clearing darkened as the figure raised a hand, its form growing larger, its power suffocating. Is and Ada exchanged a glance, fear and determination mirrored in their eyes. We face this together, Ada whispered. Always, Is replied. But as the figure stepped closer, the elder screamed, Run. You're not ready for this. Thank you for watching and listening. Part 2 will be available soon.